Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. This week's shout out goes to Blaze from Kansas City, and he shared the podcast on Instagram and with some of his friends in a group chat, he told us. Blaze also was the winner of the raffle for the last month. So congratulations, Blaze. And just remember, guys, if you share, be sure to tag us or let us know. Or if you share the podcast with a friend and they start listening, or if you get someone to subscribe, just shoot us a message and we will enter you for a raffle drawing.
Yeah, Blaze has been a huge supporter, so we really appreciate it. He's been sharing us a bunch, so he had a bunch of raffle entries.
All right, Nick, you got our wealth wisdom of the week?
Wealth wisdom of the week is to use debt as a tool, but not to get caught in the trap. Like we talk about leverage, that's kind of what it's called in business. And the more leverage you have, the better your returns can be, but also the worse they can be. So it essentially amplifies profit and loss.
Dave Ramsey is looking down on you, Nick.
He is. He is.
He's disgusted with your behavior.
Be cool if he called us out one time. But he's an easy target, so a lot of podcasts talk about him. Smart guy, free marketing though. Mm-hmm. We are marketing his podcast now.
That's true.
And Chris and Saeed, they marketed him as well when they mentioned him.
They have his book in their background.
Do they really?
All right. Moving on to our intro article. Some people may not like this, but we're going to cover it anyway because we don't really care what people like. All right. So this was an updated meta-analysis. Basically, in 2020, they had an original meta-analysis, and they concluded in that one that there is moderate certainty of evidence that wearing a mask probably makes little or no difference to the outcome of laboratory-confirmed influenza compared to not wearing a mask. I came across this study in 2020 when it came out and tried to tell people, look, the studies show that masking doesn't do anything. Really fell on deaf ears, but people were scared. So I don't know. I think the biggest thing when we look back at all this masking, especially of children in schools, is that people were just scared and they just wanted to be safe. I think the fear made a bigger difference than even the virtue signaling that people wanted to do. What do you think? Do you think virtue signaling that you were saving lives by wearing a mask, or do you think fear was a bigger contributor to that whole thing?
So I think in the beginning, I would say it was probably fear. And then I think it became more of a virtue signaling / like cultural faux pas to not wear a mask. Mm-hmm. At least that's the boat I was in, because when I would go into stores and every single other person was wearing one, I would feel very weird not putting one on, which I know you still didn't wear them. But I would. But if there was like one other person not wearing one, I would take it off.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you were a first follower, not a leader.
Follower. Exactly.
Hey, first followers are important.
They are.
They get trends going.
Mm-hmm.
So in that original meta-analysis, they said it was not effective because the particles were 3 to 100 times smaller than the pores in the surgical masks. So that's that whole meme that you probably saw on social media about a mosquito flying through a chain link fence. And then we're addressing this because recently they updated the meta-analysis. They had more studies on the effectiveness of masks, especially with COVID. And the update, this is called it's been commonly referred to as the Cochrane study because that's the website it was on, Cochrane. But the update stated, wearing masks in the community probably makes little or no difference to the outcome of influenza-like illness / COVID-19-like illness compared to not wearing masks. So I think for me, the big takeaway on this is just because a lot of people are loudly yelling something does not mean they are right. And you should really do your own homework. If everyone is telling you to do something, you can still investigate it for yourself and see if they're right or not, because a lot of people will just hear something and say it and it may not be correct. So
yeah, like anytime that you read something, you really should verify it, because I mean, we hear things all the time that are wrong. Like I was talking with one guy at work the other day about Americans' number one source of protein, and I told you it was white bread, which is what he said, which, I mean, Americans eat a lot of white bread. There's like a gram or two of protein in it, but I did look that up afterwards, and that I don't think that was correct.
Yeah, Nick texted me. I was like, "There's no way that is correct."
Yeah,
but I mean that's like why we have. I mean, these outlines are thick, but for these episodes, we really go in and make sure that what we're saying is correct and that we have sources behind what we say, because we don't want to give you guys the wrong information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. On the masks, the one kicker for me was the people who would be driving alone in their cars with a mask on.
You still see it sometimes.
You do. I saw it the other day. I saw it yesterday.
Right. Some people.
Shall we get into today's episode?
I just want to say one thing before we move on from the COVID stuff. Something like this will happen again, and you just have to, I think, reflect back on previous experiences. And then also, if you were someone that like saw the absurdity of a lot of the COVID stuff in the beginning, it's important not to get jaded and not to blame other people for their mistakes. You know, I would say like, forgive people for maybe how they acted during COVID, but also maybe don't forget and maybe take what they say going forward with a grain of salt if they were continually wrong and forcing other people to do things.
Yeah, and there's also nothing wrong with admitting that you were wrong. I think that shows somebody that's very humble, and it's something that's important to do if you actually care about the truth.
Yeah. All right. This episode is going to be all about stress. Nick has been very, very excited for this episode.
Yeah, we put a lot of time into it because we hear about stress all the time and how it's bad for you, how it might be good in some ways. And I just wanted to learn a lot more about it. So this is something I didn't really know too much about before I started looking into it. And it's really interesting.
All right, Nick, what would you like to start off with?
So Ted found a website that kind of gives you a stress score. It gives you a questionnaire.
Yeah, this actually comes out of one of my training certifications for looking at different clients' stress levels during an intake. So shout out Prescript.
Yeah, so Ted and I both took it and we have our scores. I scored a 158, which 150 and below is considered a low level of stress, and 150 to 300 is above where you want to be.
Yeah, so these scores, it's just there's a bunch of different rows basically, and they have different numerical values associated with them. And if you check off that box for something that has occurred in your life in the past year, then you add that towards your total. So if your total is below 150, you're considered to be low stress. If it's between 150 and 300, statistically, you have a 50% chance of a health breakdown in the next 2 years. And if your score is above 300, you have an 80% chance of health breakdown in the next 2 years. So,
and we will link this if you guys want to take it. It was kind of fun, and it doesn't take very long.
Yeah, it's called the Holmes Rahe Stress Inventory, for those wondering. But we'll throw it in the show notes on the website. And as Nick said, he got a 158, and I was a little bit higher. I was at a 282. So there's different ways we can go about this. Do you want to start off with what you thought about it?
Sure. Yeah. So my score, like I'm cool with my score where it is now. I noticed with the questions, the biggest thing is change. Anytime there's a big life event that is stressful. And when I moved from Wisconsin to Charleston, there were 2 questions on like big moves. And that's what really put me over the 150 is that I answered yes to both of those. The rest of them, I don't remember exactly what I answered yes to, but they were smaller. but big life changes like graduating college, starting a job, buying a home, getting married, that tend to happen earlier in life. Those are stressful. One thing I will add is that I don't think it does a great job hitting all of work stress. There are a lot of work questions on there, but there are some, like the reason why I left my last job is because there was like a 3-month stretch where I was super stressed out about a certain situation with a client. And I couldn't answer yes to one of those questions, but that is essentially why I left that job, because it just put me to a breaking point.
Yeah. I think it's a good starting point for a scale to see maybe where someone is. Obviously it leaves out some things. There's no checkbox for Ranger School, which is a pretty stressful life event on your body. So, but the other place I wanted to go with this is just because someone is higher on this stress score doesn't mean that their body is overstressed, right? So, they've actually shown that depending on how you interpret stress makes a big difference on how stress actually affects your body, right?
Yes.
So Nick and I have seen the studies on how testosterone actually makes you perceive less stress, right? So the higher testosterone levels are, the less stress your body actually perceives, which is, I think, pretty interesting. But basically how you think about stress and how you think about how things affect you can change the amount of actual stress that your body feels. This is why part of anxiety is like mental and cognitive behavioral therapy can really help people that are anxious or depressed.
Yeah, I think this is where your Instagram mindset mentors actually have it right. That it can, like your mindset can make a difference.
Yeah.
And we see that, I know I have it somewhere in the notes, but it essentially differentiates whether stress is a positive for your health versus a negative.
Perception changes your reality.
Yes. Yeah.
And then one of the other things that I wanted to address with the scale is I think it would be cool if they also had like a negative points column.
Oh, yeah.
So if you do things in your life that actually take away stress, I feel like that would make the scale a little bit better. It would add a lot of complexity to it. But just like if you have a hero mindset, if you're the hero of your own story in life instead of a victim, I feel like that decreases the amount of stress. Reading the Bible, having a strong church community, I think that those are huge for decreasing your stress levels. Being on a whole food diet physically is going to make your gut less stressed. We know that a lot of neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. 95% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. So if your gut is inflamed from a poor diet, it's going to affect your neurotransmitter levels, which is going to affect your stress and how you feel, right? So these things are all interlinked, and even something like your diet can change your stress levels or the inflammation that is occurring in your body. And then I had some other things, physical activity, being active, getting in the sun, having positive relationships, and of course, Jesus. I think that those things can decrease your stress levels.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll start off with the purpose of this episode. I mean, I kind of explained it earlier, but we just want people to better understand the sources of stress in their life, which this helped me understand the sources of mine and how to combat it in a way, but then also realize that it can be a positive. So do you know, like I have somewhat of an understanding, but like the evolutionary purpose of stress, I think it's to, like, if you're in imminent danger, it's supposed to get blood flowing, get your adrenaline going. And
yeah, so different things like cortisol or catecholamines like epinephrine, norepinephrine, what you might think of as adrenaline, right? These different compounds or hormones in your body are they're used to make you do something to get out of danger a lot of times. So the classic example is evolutionarily, thousands of years ago, when we were face to face with a bear or saber-toothed tiger or whatever, it's supposed to spike your cortisol, make you feel stressed so that it increases your blood sugar and you move and get out of Dodge, right? Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, but now people are stressed from social media, their jobs, stuff like that. So it's going constantly. Mm-hmm. And if you look at animals, like they just don't care they don't care about their appearance. They don't care about anything like that. And they're generally not stressed from it. But humans are.
That's why everyone loves dogs.
Yeah.
They're so carefree.
Yeah. And I found a pretty cool research study about stress, and it focused more on animals. These were animal studies. I know they used chicks and I forget the other one, but just because it's hard to study stress in humans, because like Ted was kind of talking about, it's self-reported. Mm-hmm. So in like that sense, I kind of like to think about it, you got your rich housewife who has the maid come in today and has lunch with her friends and she's all stressed out. And then you got people in ranger school. So, and they could report the same level of stress, mm-hmm. essentially. And it looked a lot at, in utero. Well,
yeah. So, the study that Nick's referring to, this bird study, there were a couple parts to it. The first part, they looked at how hormones in utero. So, basically, when the baby animal or bird was developing, how the hormone levels of the mama bird impacted the actual hormones during the life cycle of that baby bird.
Yeah. So it found that stress while the baby is developing,
the mother's stress,
yes, led to early telomere loss, which is essentially why humans age.
Yeah, so telomeres are basically, you can think of them as like the endings on strands of DNA, right? And so when DNA is multiplying over time, these telomeres get kind of stressed or frayed. And the reason that cells age is from these telomeres getting slightly damaged, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and early stress is beneficial if you're going to be in a dangerous environment because it kind of leads you to adapt. It does lead to a shorter lifespan, and it doesn't have any effect on early death, really.
Mm-hmm. So right there from the first part of this study, we can see that the mother's stress while the baby is growing impacts the baby's hormones and aging during that baby's life cycle, which mm-hmm. is kind of crazy, but also lines up directly what we've learned from Shauna Swan. Dr. Swan has been on Joe Rogan. That's a pretty good episode if you want to check it out. But she talks about basically how microplastics influence testosterone in males. So when the mother is pregnant and is consuming microplastics, it has direct effects on the testosterone levels of that baby when he grows up.
Yeah, and I think we're learning more and more about how important like the first few years from conception through early childhood is for human development. Mm-hmm. And these studies mainly looked at glucocorticoids. Do you know what those are?
Glucocorticoids, it's a basically class of hormone like cortisol. So the reason that it's looking at glucocorticoids is different animals don't have the same molecules that humans have, right? So just think of glucocorticoids as cortisol and cortisol similar compounds.
Mm-hmm. And there was a limitation. They talked about how it was hard to just isolate this variable. So we'll go on to the postnatal effects. Mm-hmm. And one of probably the most stressful experience anybody can have is going through birth, and from both perspectives, from the child being born and the mother as well. And following that, if the child is immediately separated from the mother, that is extremely stressful for the child because they just spent 9 months inside, like skin to skin, and that's what they want when they're born. So that is very stressful. And we talked about, or no, we didn't talk about it, but like home births, those are kind of a thing.
I feel like they're becoming more popular because like we don't have the stat here. I forget the percentage of births that are currently becoming C-sections, but it's like very, very high. Like it historically does not make sense. And basically what happens is there's this cascade of effects that happens when the mother is on an epidural that then leads to a C-section. And also in the hospital, oftentimes the mother is separated from the baby for quite a while. So because of like those two things, a lot of people are starting to move towards home births.
Yeah. And I saw somebody's like birth receipt from a hospital, and they were charged extra for holding their baby after birth.
It's like $20,000 bill.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. We'll talk about that in our healthcare episode as well. And then on the other hand, early handling by humans of a child has been shown to increase cognitive function later in life. So, I mean, that alone, I think, is a big reason to hold your babies.
Yeah.
And then studies in animals suggest shorter lifespans in captivity versus wild. Like when you look up the lifespan of an animal, it will show its captivity age and then its wild age. And the captivity age is generally a lot lower. And that's because they are, so they say, more stressed in captivity. But I think this also goes to your point that there should be the negatives as well, because they don't get to run free. They are fed every day. They don't have to worry about getting food. So
yeah,
think that's
they don't
lower.
Have predators, right? Mm-hmm. It seems like they should be less stressed because everything is there for them. But I think we see this in humans as well. Like humans need to work, right? We need a purpose in life. So great book. We've talked about it before. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, where he basically was in the concentration camps during the Holocaust, and he was a psychiatrist before he was in the camps. And during that whole horrifying experience, he came up with this kind of theory that humans need purpose in either their faith with God or the relationships with family and friends, or purpose through work to like basically keep going in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another thing that I saw is that when animals aren't stressed early in life, they start to develop, like males will not fully develop into what they would have been had they been in the wild. Like, I think that's why dogs develop spots, supposedly. Huh. I don't know if that's true, but I read that somewhere. Did not verify it though. So, yes. And then going into childhood a little bit, small chicks, so below average mass, were moved to a different brood when they were young. Mm-hmm. And that really affected their hormones. They had more telomere loss. They became more impulsive, and they were unwilling to wait for larger rewards. Okay. So none of that like delayed gratification that we like to talk about, mm-hmm. which maybe it translates to humans, maybe it doesn't, but
yeah.
Sorry, Ted and I are not experts in this. There was a lot of research, and do you want to talk a little bit about the physiological response to stress?
Yeah. So I touched on it earlier when I was explaining cortisol in the whole evolution saber-tooth tiger example. But basically, when you're stressed, your cortisol is going to increase. And cortisol, one of the things that it does is it tells your body to release glucose. So it increases your blood sugar, right? And then when your blood sugar increases, your body releases insulin to get your blood sugar to come down. Now, one of the problems that in Western society that we've seen skyrocket lately is insulin resistance. You've probably heard. Type 2 diabetes is the extreme end of that, right? So when your insulin is constantly elevated, your body becomes more resistant to it, right? Just kind of like any drug that you take, right? If I'm always drinking coffee, my body doesn't respond as much to caffeine. So one of the problems with constantly having these increased cortisol levels is that it leads to insulin resistance. And this can get you stuck in just a spiraling out of control cascade of effects where, all right, now you've got insulin resistance, and that throws off your hormones, and then you are starting to crave sugar. And then when you keep eating sugar, maybe you stop going to the gym, and then it's this whole anxiety and depression cascade. We've talked before about how diet and exercise pair together in people, and once people stop one of them, they kind of stop the other as well, generally. So it's definitely a cascade of effects that we want to try to avoid, and the first step of that is avoiding being chronically overstressed.
Yeah. So do you think this could contribute to diabetes?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It does.
I mean, well, because if you're becoming insulin resistant through chronic stress, then, I mean, the extreme end of that is type 2 diabetes.
So that combined with diet
can,
okay. You want to talk a little bit about the techniques to decrease stress?
Sure.
If you are overstressed, and these are more of the negatives, like the ones that subtract from your stress score that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some things that you can do to decrease stress, there's things you can do in the short term, and then there's also things that you can do in the long term, right? So with my clients, one of the things that I often will do for some clients is I'll have in my app a spot where I require them to do 10 or 15 minutes of a certain activity that they enjoy that will help decrease their stress, right? Mm-hmm. So it depends on the person, and it depends if I think they need this daily habit thing. But
yeah, here I hear a lot about mental health days at work, which if you need to take one, that's completely fine. But don't spend it on your phone. That will make you more stressed. You should do activities that will lower your stress that you actually enjoy.
Yeah, some of those activities could be reading a book or talking with someone about the thing that's stressing you, or just going outside and getting some sunshine. Prayer and meditation, I think, are also really good at helping you de-stress. I personally find the Bible reading to be very de-stressing, just because whenever I'm reading, especially New Testament, I always find something new that seems like it was written for exactly what I'm stressed about, you know. Mm-hmm. Especially with all the parables in the New Testament, it always seems like there's something I come across.
Yeah. And I mean, humans are social creatures, and I think guys especially have a tough time talking about it. And, you can just talk with a friend about it, girlfriend, or you can go to a professional to talk about it. But that, I'm pretty sure from what I've read, that is the single best thing to do. And that's both a short-term fix and a long-term fix. Because when you talk about it with someone, I think you release oxytocin. Okay. Which helps you, or it could be one of the other ones.
Oxytocin helps with bonding with people.
Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure it releases that, and that makes you a lot less stressed. Mm-hmm. Also, I know just skin to skin contact, it doesn't have just shaking hands or something like that will release oxytocin as well. Yeah. So if you aren't very, I guess, social, or not even social, but just talking with people and being around other people will help you combat your stress.
Nick is saying if you're stressed, go out on the street with a free hug sign.
Those free hug shirts, what was that, 2012? I keep seeing things of Coney 2012. Do you remember that?
Oh, God. That was a while ago. I forgot about that.
Random things just seem to pop up, and free hugs had a run.
Some other things you can do in the short term to decrease stress. You can try an adaptogen like ashwagandha, which helps your body reduce stress, which is pretty interesting that you can take things like that, just natural herbals that will do that. There's a lot of memes going around about ashwagandha right now, about how guys that take ashwagandha like don't feel emotion because they're just not stressed.
Yeah, I was talking about that with a guy at work, and he was saying he took it for a while and he just like didn't feel anything.
That's so weird.
Yeah, which from what I've read, everybody has a different response to it, kind of, and it affects everybody differently.
Yeah, I used to take a multivitamin like probably beginning of college that had some ashwagandha in it, and I never like experienced those effects. But
yeah, I mean, I took it for a little bit, and after he said that, I was kind of like, maybe I did. I didn't notice it at the time a lot, so maybe it doesn't affect me like that.
You're just not in tune with your emotions, Nick.
Yeah, or maybe I just don't have emotions at all, and so there wasn't anything to get rid of.
Some other things that you can do in the short term to decrease stress if the ones we mentioned don't help you out. Lifting. For me, lifting is very stress relieving. Going to the gym, getting some physical activity. You can also try going on a walk. That helps a lot of people, just getting up and moving. Or if you have a bunch of things to do, just picking something off your checklist and getting it done and reducing the amount of things on your list can help a lot of people. Even if it's not the most important thing you have to do or the thing you're stressed about, building momentum through doing something else you have to do can help a lot of people feel less stressed and then can get them moving towards working on the things they have to work on. This is why a lot of people, when they're like studying for finals, will start cleaning their room for 2 hours when they hadn't cleaned their room in 3 weeks. Their body just needs to start doing something before they can get to the thing that they're stressed about.
Yeah, I like both the checklist and the cleaning. Like I might use the cleaning as a procrastination tactic. When I don't want to do something, I just start cleaning. But I cleaned my desk the other day after tax season, and I said to the guy next to me, I feel like my blood pressure just went down. But then also the checklist, just having something written down and then crossing it off feels good. So that's a great way to get yourself to do stuff that you have to be doing.
Yeah. And then if we want to shift to some like longer term stress relief practices, I guess the first one we could hit on is Nick touched this earlier with his old job. If you're in a job that's super stressful, maybe looking for another job, if your job is causing you undue amounts of stress, maybe it's not the right job for you. I guess this is a very situationally dependent.
And don't make rash choices to leave a job. I mean, I felt like I was making a quick choice when I left my last job, but looking back, it was not. It was definitely for the better.
You had talked to me for months about leaving before you did. So
but I've also noticed to your lifting point, tax seasons when I am lifting, I am a lot less stressed. I was thinking about leaving for a little bit before I actually did, like a few months. And also I was moving to Charleston. It was just a good time.
Another thing is changing the people around you. If a lot of people's stress comes from surrounding themselves with people that are causing them stress. So finding people and surrounding yourself with people that don't stress you out could be a good thing for your stress levels.
Yes, if you're in a friend group that has a lot of drama, that will wear on you for sure.
Or, even just on the opposite side of that, finding people that support you and that you feel like you can go to with problems will help reduce your stress levels by not adding, but by taking away stress.
Yeah. And then another one we talked about earlier is just changing your mindset around stress. I know they did a study on nervousness versus excitement, because it's the same physiological response and it's about how you view it. So if so if you are feeling nervous and like because your blood starts pumping quicker, which I think is essentially a stress response. If you view it as being excited and your body as helping you prepare for a situation, whether it be, a speaking event, first date, something like that, then you perform a lot better and your stress is lower.
Yeah. And like with mindset, they've done studies on the effectiveness of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically just like how you think about things and shifting the way that you think about things. And so if you are someone that struggles with anxiety, maybe look up cognitive behavioral therapy and look through those different mindset shifts. And they've done studies that show it's almost as effective as antidepressants. And then in relation to that, I guess we'll rewind to college real quick. My capstone project with a partner for pre-med was we basically just got to pick whatever we wanted. And mine and my partner's was on how lifting or resistance training was more effective than antidepressants or SSRIs for treating anxiety and depression. And the capstone professor kind of didn't respect our report, I think, even though we had studies to back it up. And then pretty recently, a couple months ago, there's a big study that came out that solidified even more that lifting can be more effective than antidepressants for treating anxiety and depression. So we're not telling you to go off antidepressants if you're on them, but that is something to definitely be aware of. And maybe if you do struggle with anxiety, depression, trying to get on a program and having some consistency in the gym. And then also this just goes back to, I think one of the episodes we refer to a lot is our interview with Katie, episode, I think number 8, naturopathic medicine, and how a lot of these problems that we are treating with drugs can be treated actually with better results through just natural lifestyle changes.
Yeah, and the drugs just kind of cover up the symptom, really. They don't really treat the underlying problem, which unless you want to be on like an SSRI for the rest of your life, you should try to change these lifestyle factors either first or at the same time.
Yeah.
I know what I've heard is that lifting is as effective or more effective for mild to moderate depression, anxiety. But then once you start getting to like the higher levels, it is not as effective. And obviously if like you're suicidal, that is a very, very, like you have to fix that immediately. So that's when we would use, or when I would use, like some sort of pharmaceutical drug.
Yeah. But again, talk to your doctor. And if your doctor doesn't know about these studies, maybe find a new doctor.
Maybe Katie Rohr in a few years.
Yeah. All right, Nick, do you have anything else for us with stress?
That's about all I got. Yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah.
Oh, book club.
Oh, yes. We have our book club. We almost forgot. Nick, do you want to go first?
I will. So, I kind of have to come out of the closet a little bit.
No, Nick.
I am not an avid reader. Ted told me not to say this, but I only read a couple books a year. The thing is, which it's very good to read. I don't have a problem with reading comprehension. Those, I always scored very well on reading comprehension on all my standardized testing. And it's really good for people who aren't able to comprehend stuff, I think. I'm also a very slow reader. So, I mean, while I'm comprehending it, if I listen to a podcast, I can learn a lot faster. Yeah. Exactly. So I have read
But Nick does read, and I would say that Nick reads a lot more than the average person. But what Nick is saying is that not all of the wealth books are his. Something I give to him.
This one I have read, though, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's probably the number one self-help book out there. I think it was written in like the 30s or something like that. This is Ted's copy. And the one I got, I also got like a little cheat sheet, like note sheet of all of all his, I think he has like probably 10, 15 things to do. Essentially how to manipulate people.
No, that's not what it is.
But it is how to be more likable, and it's also geared towards sales, like how to sell better as well.
I mean, this will definitely help you with sales, even just with the suggestions that it makes and the historical examples of like things as simple as writing handwritten letters to people, or making sure that you remember people's names.
Yeah, saying people's names. I know a lot of people know that, but people love hearing their own name. It's their favorite word in the English dictionary.
Is that paraphrasing?
It is?
That's
okay.
literally like exactly what Dale Carnegie says in the book.
Yeah, so I've always heard that. And but I have a podcast that I want to recommend. There's a guy that I listen to, Russ Roberts. I've talked about him before. He does EconTalks. And if you don't have an economic or like a general understanding of economics, it might be a little hard to follow. I think he generally does a good job putting it into layman's terms. But the one that I'm recommending today, he did with another economist, and there were parts that I had a tough time following. But if the word incentive really gets you going and you love figuring out where incentives are, this would be a great one. The title is Michael Munger on Antitrust, and he gets into a lot of the economics around huge business like Amazon, Walmart, stuff like that, and when they think the government should step in to break something up. And they're both classical liberal. They believe in classical liberalism, which is not related to politics. It was really started in like 1600s by a guy named Adam Smith, I believe. Yep. So that's kind of where he's coming from, which is more of a libertarian conservative type of view on the economy. But I would definitely recommend giving that one a listen. For anyone that took like a high school history class that doesn't remember who Adam Smith is, that would be like the invisible hand, or like that's like original supply and demand kind of economics. Wealth of Nations is Adam Smith's like most popular book that was really influential on that. I actually have read that one too. So we'll have to do that one maybe for a book club. Yeah. All right. The weights book is Sacred Cow. So we're going more towards diet here. Sacred Cow talks about how good red meat is for you. It goes into the nutrition in red meat. And then this book is maybe not as much of a weights or diet book as people might think once they start reading it, because it really goes into how grass-fed and regenerative agriculture is good for the planet and good for you. So although it does touch on the nutrition in red meat and how everyone should be eating red meat basically because of how nutritious it is, it also talks about the environment. And I think for me, that was the most interesting part of the book. So a little bit of a deviation from our normal weights book on lifting here, but Sacred Cow, really good book if you want to learn about how regenerative agriculture actually affects the environment and solutions for that going away from factory farming in the future, because I don't think anyone likes seeing the videos of animals just penned up in cages their whole life, and just like the sick animals that exist in that sphere of agriculture. Yeah, I mean, like the primary reason that I eat grass-fed is because it's better for your health, but also you have all these other reasons to also eat grass-fed. Yeah. The only sticking point is the price. It is more expensive. But if you care about your health or the well-being of animals or the environment, you should be eating grass-fed. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks. And if you have any questions for us, just hit the comments on YouTube or head to our Instagram.